You need to see this. It's important for the neighborhood.
Let me take a look. We can figure this out together.
Please, there must be some mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. This is unacceptable, Cheryl. You've gone too far this time.
Please, let's discuss this calmly. You're overreacting.
Can't just put this violation notice on my car. The test has just got me calm.
It might be a misunderstanding.
We cannot let this opportunity slip away. This is our chance to make a real difference. This can't be right. How could this happen?
We need to figure this out immediately.
They thought they were foreclosing on a helpless 82-year-old widow. What they didn't know was that her grandson, me, had just wrapped a 3-year undercover operation with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. And I was about to treat their little HOA like a RICO case. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'd seen organized crime families with more integrity than the Maple Grove HOA board. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And has your HOA or neighborhood ever tried something this brazen? Drop your city and state. I want to see how widespread this problem really is. My grandmother, Dorothy Webb, had lived at 47 Oakmont Circle for 36 years. She'd raised my mom there. I'd spent every summer there as a kid, learning to ride a bike on that driveway, building a treehouse in the backyard oak that was probably still violating some HOA bylaw nobody enforced until they needed leverage. Grandpa died 4 years ago. Lung cancer. He'd been the one who handled all the paperwork, all the bills, all the bureaucratic noise. Grandma was sharp as ever, could still quote Yeats from memory and beat me at Scrabble, but she'd never had to deal with the administrative warfare that modern homeownership had become. I visited every few weeks when I was stateside. My job kept me away more than I liked. The Bureau had me embedded in a mortgage fraud ring operating out of South Florida for the better part of 3 years. We'd just executed arrests 2 months ago, 17 defendants, $340 million in fraudulent loans, predatory lending schemes that destroyed families. I was tired. I was supposed to be on mandatory leave, seeing a bureau therapist twice a week to decompress from the undercover work. I was looking forward to quiet weekends at Grandma's, maybe finally fixing that treehouse. I pulled into her driveway on a Friday afternoon in late September and immediately knew something was wrong. There was a neon orange notice zip-tied to her mailbox post. Not taped, zip-tied, like they were marking a condemned building. The paper was already sun-faded, meaning it had been there a while. Final notice of violation. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. I felt that old familiar tightness in my chest, the same sensation I got right before a raid when you know the target might be armed. The notice listed 17 violations. 17. Everything from lawn height exceeds 3.5 inches to unauthorized garden gnome display to driveway oil stain visible from street. Each violation carried a fine. The fines had late fees. The late fees had interest. Total amount due, $47,300. And at the bottom, in bold, failure to remit payment in full by October 1st will result in foreclosure proceedings and forced sale of property to recover HOA debts per CC and RS Section 19.4. October 1st was in 9 days. I found Grandma in the kitchen, hands shaking as she tried to pour tea. The kettle rattled against the cup. "Marcus, sweetheart, I didn't want to bother you while you were working." "Grandma." I took the kettle from her gently, set it down, held her hands. They felt like paper. "How long has this been going on?" Her eyes were wet. "About a year. Maybe more. It started small, a letter about the mailbox needing repainting. Then the lawn. Then the garden gnomes your grandfather loved. I tried to keep up, but every time I fixed one thing, they'd find 3 more. And the fines kept growing. And I stopped opening the letters because I didn't know what to do, and it's okay." I kept my voice level, but inside, that old investigative machinery was already spinning up. "Do you have all the letters?" "Everything they've sent." She nodded toward a drawer. "I kept them all. I thought maybe I'd need them if they really try to take the house." I pulled out the drawer. It was stuffed with envelopes, dozens of them, maybe 50 or more. Some still sealed. I started laying them out on the kitchen table in chronological order, and the pattern emerged immediately. Classic escalation scheme. Start with legitimate-sounding violations. Establish a paper trail. Bury the target in bureaucratic language. Let the fines compound. Then move in for the kill when the numbers get big enough to justify foreclosure. I'd seen loan sharks operate with more subtlety. The next morning, Saturday, I drove to the address listed on the notices. The Maple Grove HOA management office, a converted retail space in a strip mall 2 miles from Grandma's neighborhood. The woman behind the desk had the look of someone who'd found a small amount of power and intended to wield it like a scepter. Frosted blonde hair, acrylic nails, a nameplate that read Cheryl Kensington, HOA president. "Can I help you?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here about Dorothy Webb, 47 Oakmont Circle. I'm her grandson." The smile vanished. "Mrs. Webb's account is severely delinquent. If you're here to discuss payment arrangements, you'll need to speak with our attorney." "I'm here to discuss these." I laid out 3 of the violation notices. Lawn height measured at 3.7 inches. Driveway oil stain. Garden gnomes. "When were these inspections conducted?" "Our board performs regular community assessments." "Who specifically?" "Names. Dates. Times." Cheryl's expression hardened. "We're not required to provide that level of detail. The violations are documented and valid. If Mrs. Webb wishes to dispute them, she can request a hearing with the board, but that won't stop the foreclosure timeline. The debt is the debt." I leaned forward slightly. $47,000. For lawn height and garden gnomes. And late fees. And interest. And administrative costs. It's all spelled out in the CC and RS that Mrs. Webb signed when she purchased the property. In 1987. "The rules are the rules, Mr. Webb." Marcus Webb. I didn't offer my hand. "I'd like copies of the inspection records. Photographs. Measurement documentation. Names of the board members who conducted the assessments." "That's not how this works." Cheryl stood up, signaling the conversation was over. "Mrs. Webb has until October 1st to pay in full or enter a payment plan with our attorney. After that, we proceed with foreclosure. It's out of my hands." "Nothing's out of your hands, Miss Kensington. You're the HOA president." Her smile returned, sharp and cold. "Then let me be clear. Your grandmother is in violation of her covenant obligations. She's had ample opportunity to comply. We've been more than patient. If she can't maintain her property to community standards, perhaps it's time she considered alternative living arrangements. Assisted living facilities don't have lawn height requirements." I felt my jaw tighten. In my 3 years undercover, I'd sat across from men who ran Ponzi schemes that ruined retirement accounts. I'd watched predatory lenders celebrate over drinks after foreclosing on families. I developed a pretty good radar for people who hurt others for profit. Cheryl Kensington lit up that radar like a Christmas tree. "I'll be in touch," I said. "October 1st, Mr. Webb." Not a day later. I spent the weekend doing what I do best, building a case. First, I walked Grandma's property with a tape measure and a camera. The lawn was 3.2 inches, well within the 3.5-inch limit they'd cited. The oil stain on the driveway was a faint discoloration the size of a dinner plate, barely visible. The garden gnomes were in the backyard, not visible from the street. Every single violation was either fabricated or exaggerated. Then I started knocking on doors. Maple Grove was a community of about 200 homes, mostly retirees and young families. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained properties, the kind of place that should have been peaceful. But when I asked neighbors about the HOA, the stories started pouring out. Tom and Linda Pacheco, 3 houses down, hit with $8,000 in fines for a non-approved porch light. They'd replaced it immediately, but the fines kept coming for delayed compliance. The Hendersons across the street threatened with foreclosure over a fence that was allegedly 4 inches too tall. They'd had it professionally surveyed. It was exactly the approved height. Didn't matter. The fine stuck. Yolanda Martinez, a single mom 2 blocks over, $12,000 in violations for excessive noise because her 8-year-old son played basketball in the driveway after school. Every story followed the same pattern. Questionable violation, escalating fines, threats of foreclosure, and always, the suggestion that maybe they should just sell and move somewhere more suitable. By Sunday evening, I had statements from 11 families. Total fines assessed, $340,000. And here's what made my investigator instincts scream. In the past 18 months, 7 families had sold their homes under duress. Every single property was purchased by the same LLC, Maple Grove Properties Holdings. I ran the LLC through public records. Registered agent, Harold Kensington, Cheryl's husband. Monday morning, I called my supervisor at the bureau, assistant special agent in charge Jennifer Ortiz. Marcus, you're supposed to be decompressing. Therapy, fishing, bad TV, not working. I need a favor. Off the books for now. I heard her sigh. What did you find? I laid it out. The pattern of violations, the foreclosure threats, the LLC buying properties, the Kensington connection. Silence on the other end. Then, how much money are we talking about? Hard to say without subpoenas. But if they're forcing sales below market value and flipping properties? 7 homes in 18 months. Average market value around $420,000. Bought for maybe $300,000 under distress. Resold at market. We're talking about $800,000 in profit, conservatively. And that's just what I found in one weekend. That's wire fraud if they're using electronic communications to facilitate. Mail fraud if they're sending the notices. Possibly extortion depending on how explicit the threats are. And if there's any coordination with local officials, building inspectors, county clerks, could be honest services fraud, maybe even RICO if we can show a pattern. Another pause. You're supposed to be on leave. I know. And you want to open a case on an HOA. I want to protect my grandmother. But yeah, if there's a federal case here, I want it. Send me everything you have. I'll run it past the criminal division. But Marcus, if this goes forward, you're not lead. You're too close. Conflict of interest. I know. I just need someone to look at it. I'll call you back. She hung up. I sat in Grandma's kitchen, looking at the spreadsheet I'd built. 17 families targeted. 11 still fighting. 7 already displaced. And October 1st was in 6 days. That afternoon, Cheryl Kensington came to Grandma's house. I watched through the window as she got out of a white Mercedes SUV, accompanied by a man in a cheap suit carrying a clipboard. She walked up to the porch like she owned it. I opened the door before she could knock. Mr. Webb, I'm here to conduct a follow-up inspection. No. Her smile froze. Excuse me. You're not inspecting anything. This is private property. You have no authority to enter without permission, and permission is denied. The man with the clipboard stepped forward. HOA bylaws grant the board inspection rights for common areas and exteriors visible from the street, not private property, and certainly not the interior of a home. You want to inspect something, get a warrant. Cheryl's expression shifted from surprise to cold anger. We're trying to help Mrs. Webb come into compliance by threatening to steal her house. We're enforcing community standards. You're running an extortion scheme. The words hung in the air. The man with the clipboard actually took a step back. Cheryl's voice dropped to a whisper. Be very careful what you accuse people of, Mr. Webb. I'm an FBI agent, Miss Kensington. I've spent 3 years investigating financial fraud. I know exactly what I'm looking at. For just a second, maybe half a second, I saw fear flicker across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that sharp smile. Then you know that everything we've done is legal. The CC and RS are a binding contract. Your grandmother signed them. She's in violation. We're within our rights. We'll see. October 1st, Mr. Webb. 5 days. After that, it's out of my hands. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and you might want to move your car. It's parked in violation of the street parking ordinance. Overnight parking is prohibited. That's a $500 fine per night. They left. I watched the Mercedes disappear down the street. Grandma came up beside me, her hand finding mine. Marcus, maybe I should just pay something. Set up a payment plan. I don't want you to get in trouble because of me. You're not paying them a dime. I squeezed her hand gently. Trust me, Grandma. I've dealt with worse than Cheryl Kensington. But as I said it, I felt that old familiar weight settling in. The same feeling I'd had undercover when the target started to suspect something was off. That sense that the situation was about to escalate in ways I couldn't fully control. I just didn't know how right I was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at Grandma's kitchen table with my laptop, pulling property records, tax assessments, and LLC filings. The more I dug, the uglier it got. Maple Grove Properties Holdings wasn't just buying foreclosed homes. They were buying them at a fraction of market value, sometimes 40% below, then flipping them within 6 months for full market price. In 2 cases, the properties were sold to board members' family members at the discounted rate, then resold externally at markup. Classic asset stripping scheme, dressed up in HOA bylaws and community standards language. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Jennifer Ortiz. I showed your file to the criminal division chief. He's interested, but he wants more before we open an official investigation. Can you get financial records? Bank statements for the HOA account and the LLC. Not without subpoenas. Then we need probable cause for subpoenas. Right now we have a pattern that looks suspicious, but a defense attorney would argue it's aggressive but legal HOA enforcement. We need something that crosses the line into fraud. Something explicit. I rub my eyes. How much time do I have? Your grandmother's foreclosure date is October 1st. That's 4 days from now. If they actually file foreclosure, we can potentially intervene, but it's messy. Better if we can build the case before that deadline. So I have 4 days to find evidence that would normally take 4 months of investigation. I didn't say it was fair. I said it's what we need. She paused. Marcus, if you can't get there in time, we'll figure out another way to help your grandmother. You can hire a lawyer, fight the foreclosure civilly, while they do this to 17 other families. Silence. I'll find something, I said. The next morning, Tuesday, I got a knock on Grandma's door. I opened it to find Tom Pacheco standing there with a woman I didn't recognize, mid-50s, professional attire, carrying a leather briefcase. Marcus, this is Rebecca Sue. She's a real estate attorney. Works a lot of HOA cases. Rebecca extended her hand. Mr. Pacheco told me about your grandmother's situation. I've been watching Maple Grove HOA for about a year now. Mind if I come in? We sat in the living room. Rebecca pulled out a file folder 2 inches thick. I represent 3 families in this community, all facing similar circumstances, questionable violations, escalating fines, foreclosure threats. I've filed complaints with the state HOA regulatory board, but the process is slow. Meanwhile, families are losing their homes. You think it's coordinated? I asked. I think Cheryl and Harold Kensington have figured out how to weaponize HOA rules for profit. The law gives HOAs broad enforcement powers, too broad, in my opinion, and people like the Kensingtons exploit that. They target vulnerable homeowners, usually elderly or financially stretched, pile on violations, and then swoop in through their LLC to buy the property when the owner can't pay. Is it legal? Rebecca's expression darkened. That's the problem. Technically, most of what they're doing operates in a gray area. The violations might be exaggerated, but they're not entirely fabricated. The fines are high, but they're within the ranges allowed by the CC and RS. The foreclosure process follows state law. A civil court would take months to untangle it, and by then the damage is done. So what do? We need to prove intent. Show that the violations are pretextual, that the real goal is to force sales so the LLC can profit. If we can demonstrate a pattern of targeting specific homeowners while ignoring identical violations by others, we can argue selective enforcement and bad faith. I thought about the files I compiled. I've got statements from 11 families, all showing the same pattern. That's a start. But we need the HOA's internal communications. Emails, board meeting minutes, anything that shows coordination between the HOA enforcement and the LLC purchases. Those would be subpoenaed in discovery if we file suit, which takes time your grandmother doesn't have. Rebecca leaned forward. Here's what I'm thinking. There's an emergency HOA board meeting scheduled for tomorrow night, Wednesday. It's required by state law before they can finalize a foreclosure. Your grandmother has the right to attend and speak. If we can get them on record making statements that show bias or coordination, you want to bait them into saying something incriminating. I want to give them enough rope. The Kensingtons are arrogant. They've been doing this long enough that they've gotten sloppy. If we push the right buttons, they might reveal more than they intend. I liked Rebecca Sue immediately. We spent Tuesday afternoon preparing. Rebecca coached Grandma on what to say, how to stay calm, how to ask questions that would force the board to explain their process on the record. I set up recording equipment. Virginia is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows they're being recorded, it's legal. Grandma would wear a small digital recorder in her jacket pocket. I'd also bring my phone, recording audio as backup. Remember, Rebecca said, we're not trying to win the argument tomorrow night. We're trying to get them to talk. Ask about the inspection process. Who conducted the inspections? When? Whether other properties were inspected using the same standards. Make them explain the fines line by line. Grandma nodded, but I could see her hands shaking slightly. This was an 82-year-old woman who'd spent her life avoiding conflict, and we were asking her to walk into a room full of people trying to take her home. Grandma, I said gently, you don't have to do this. I can fight this other ways. No. Her voice was quiet but firm. They've been doing this to people because they think we're too old or too scared to fight back. Someone needs to stand up. It might as well be me. I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost hurt. The Maple Grove HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a bland multipurpose room with folding chairs and fluorescent lights. When we arrived at 7 p.m. Wednesday, about 30 residents were already there, more than I'd expected. Word had spread. The board sat at a folding table at the front, Cheryl Kensington in the center, flanked by 4 other board members. I recognized 2 of them from my door knocking, Gerald Voss, a retired accountant, and Patricia Monroe, who'd lived in Maple Grove for 20 years. Cheryl's expression when she saw me was priceless. Pure annoyance mixed with something that might have been worry. This meeting is for residents and board members only, she said as we took seats in the second row. Mrs. Webb is a resident, Rebecca replied smoothly. I'm her attorney. Mr. Webb is family and her designated representative. We have every right to be here. Cheryl's jaw tightened, but she didn't push it. Fine. Let's begin. The meeting started with routine business, budget reports, landscaping contracts, pool maintenance schedules. Boring procedural stuff clearly designed to make people leave early. But nobody left. The room stayed packed. Finally, 40 minutes in, Cheryl reached the agenda item we'd been waiting for. Foreclosure proceedings, 47 Oakmont Circle. She read from a prepared statement. Dorothy Webb has accumulated $47,300 in unpaid fines and fees related to multiple covenant violations over an 18-month period. Despite repeated notices and opportunities to cure, Mrs. Webb has failed to bring her property into compliance or remit payment. Per CC and RS Section 19.4, the board has authorized foreclosure proceedings to recover the debt. Mrs. Webb has until October 1st, that's tomorrow, to pay in full or vacate the property. I'd like to speak, Grandma said, her voice steady. Cheryl looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. You'll have 3 minutes during the public comment period. This agenda item directly concerns Mrs. Webb, Rebecca interjected. State law requires you to allow her to respond before any vote is taken. Cheryl glanced at the board attorney, a thin man in his 60s who'd been silent all night. He nodded reluctantly. Fine. 3 minutes. Grandma stood. I could see her hands gripping her notes, but her voice didn't waver. I've lived at 47 Oakmont Circle for 36 years. My husband and I raised our family there. We've always tried to be good neighbors, to follow the rules, to keep our property nice. When I started receiving violation notices last year, I tried to fix every problem. I repainted the mailbox. I hired a lawn service. I moved the garden gnomes my husband loved into the backyard where they couldn't be seen from the street. She paused, looking directly at Cheryl. But every time I fixed something, there was a new violation, and the fines kept growing. I don't understand how my lawn could be measured at 3.7 inches when I have it cut every week to 3 inches. I don't understand how there can be an oil stain on my driveway when I don't even own a car anymore. My grandson drives me everywhere. A murmur ran through the crowd. I'm not asking you to forgive the debt. I'm asking you to explain how it got so high. I'd like to see the inspection records, the photographs, the measurements. I'd like to know who inspected my property and when, because I've been home almost every day and I've never seen anyone with a measuring tape or a camera. Beautiful, calm, reasonable, and putting them on the spot. Cheryl's smile was strained. Mrs. Webb, the inspections are conducted by board members during routine community assessments. We don't announce them in advance. That would defeat the purpose. So who inspected my property? Grandma asked. Which board member? That information is in our records. Can you provide those records? Tonight. Cheryl glanced at Gerald Voss, the retired accountant. He shifted uncomfortably. The records are maintained in our management system, Cheryl said. We can provide them upon written request and payment of a records fee. How much is the fee? Rebecca asked. $50 per hour of research time. And how many hours would it take to pull inspection records for one property? Cheryl's smile sharpened. That would depend on how detailed the request is. I watched the other board members. Patricia Monroe was staring at the table. Gerald Voss looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The other two, a younger couple I didn't recognize, seemed confused, like they weren't entirely sure what was happening. Let me ask a different question, Grandma said. Have other properties in Maple Grove been inspected using the same standards? Because I've walked around the neighborhood, and I see lawns that look longer than mine. I see mailboxes that need painting, but I don't see violation notices on those properties. We inspect all properties, Cheryl said tightly. Some homeowners are more responsive to violations than others. Can you provide a list of all properties that have been cited for lawn height violations in the past 18 months? Silence. Mrs. Webb, your 3 minutes are. I'm not done. Grandma's voice had steel in it now. I want to know why 7 families in this community have sold their homes in the past year and a half. I want to know why all 7 of those homes were purchased by Maple Grove Properties Holdings. And I want to know what connection that company has to this board. The room erupted. Neighbors started shouting questions. Is that true? Who owns that company? Are you buying our homes? Cheryl banged a gavel. An actual gavel, like this was a courtroom. Order. This meeting will come to order. But the damage was done. The accusation was out there, and every person in that room was now looking at the board with suspicion. Cheryl tried to regain control. Maple Grove Properties Holdings is a separate legal entity. It has no connection to HOA enforcement. Your husband is the registered agent, I said, standing up. That's public record. Every head in the room turned to look at me. Cheryl's face flushed red. My husband's business dealings are not the concern of this board. They're when the board is foreclosing on properties that your husband's company then buys at below market rates. I pulled out my phone, opened the spreadsheet I'd compiled. 7 properties in 18 months. Average purchase price, $290,000. Average market value, $425,000. That's $135,000 profit per property, or about $945,000 total. And that's just the homes that have already sold. There are 17 more families currently facing foreclosure threats. The room exploded again. Neighbors were standing, shouting, demanding answers. This is outrageous. Patricia Monroe said, staring at Cheryl. You told us those foreclosures were legitimate enforcement. They are, Cheryl shouted back. Every single violation is documented. Then show us the documentation, Rebecca said calmly. Right now? Show us the inspection records, the photographs, the measurements. Prove that these violations are real and not pretextual. Cheryl looked trapped. The board attorney leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She shook her head violently. We don't have to prove anything to you people, she snapped. The violations are valid. The debt is real. And if Mrs. Webb doesn't pay by tomorrow, we will proceed with foreclosure as authorized by the CC and RS that every single one of you signed. Actually, Rebecca said, you do have to prove it. Because I'm filing an emergency injunction in county court tomorrow morning to halt the foreclosure pending a full audit of the HOA's enforcement practices. And I'm requesting that the court appoint an independent examiner to review every violation notice issued in the past 2 years. Cheryl went pale. You can't do that. I absolutely can. And given what we've heard tonight, I'm confident the court will grant it. The board attorney was whispering urgently to Cheryl now. She listened, then stood abruptly. This meeting is adjourned. You can't adjourn in the middle of. I just did. Everyone out. Now. But as people started filing out, most of them weren't leaving quietly. They were clustering in groups, talking in angry voices, looking at the board with open hostility. I helped Grandma to her feet. She was shaking, adrenaline, probably, but there was a light in her eyes I hadn't seen in months. Did we do it? She whispered. Did we stop them? For now, I said. But this isn't over. As we walked to the car, I saw Cheryl Kensington standing by her Mercedes, phone pressed to her ear, her face twisted in fury. She was calling someone, and from the look on her face, it wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. I got the call at 6:47 a.m. Thursday morning, October 1st, the foreclosure deadline. It was Jennifer Ortiz. Marcus, we have a problem. I was already awake, sitting at Grandma's kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, monitoring the county court system for Rebecca's emergency injunction filing. What kind of problem? I got a call an hour ago from the Virginia State Bar. Someone filed a complaint against Rebecca Sue. Unauthorized practice of law, improper client solicitation, and, get this, attempted extortion of an HOA board. My blood went cold. That's insane. Rebecca's been practicing for 20 years. I know. It's clearly retaliatory. But the complaint triggers an automatic review process, and until it's resolved, there's a cloud over any filing she makes. The injunction request she was planning to file this morning? A judge might refuse to hear it given the ethics complaint. How fast can we get the complaint dismissed? Days, if we're lucky. Weeks, more likely. And Marcus, there's more. The complaint was filed by a lawyer named Richard Vance. I looked him up. He's done work for Maple Grove HOA in the past, but his main practice is land use and development. And guess who his biggest client is? I already knew. Harold Kensington. Maple Grove Properties Holdings, specifically. Vance has represented them in at least a dozen property transactions over the past 2 years. So this was how the Kensingtons fought back. They'd spent the night activating their network. Lawyers, connections, bureaucratic weapons. Trying to neutralize our attorney before she could file the injunction. What about the foreclosure? I asked. Can they proceed today? Legally? Yes, if they follow the process. They'd need to file with the county clerk, but if no injunction is in place, there's nothing stopping them. I looked at the clock. County clerk's office opened at 8 a.m. We had an hour and 13 minutes. I called Rebecca. She'd already heard about the ethics complaint and was furious. This is textbook witness intimidation, she said. I'm filing a counter-complaint against Vance and requesting an emergency hearing. But you're right. We might not have time before they file the foreclosure. What if we had evidence of coordination? I asked. Between the HOA and the LLC. Something explicit that shows this isn't legitimate enforcement, it's a profit scheme. That would change everything. But we don't have that. Not yet. What if we did? I told her about the recording from last night's meeting. Grandma's questions, Cheryl's evasions, the board members' reactions. That's good, Rebecca said, but it's not enough. It shows suspicious behavior, but a judge could still rule that the foreclosure itself is technically legal even if the underlying enforcement was aggressive. We need something that proves intent, a smoking gun. I thought about Cheryl's phone call in the parking lot. The fury on her face. The urgency. What if we could get her to say it out loud? I asked. On record. Admit that the violations are pretextual, that the goal is to acquire properties. How would you do that? An idea was forming. Risky. Probably stupid. Definitely not by the book. But I'd spent 3 years undercover getting targets to incriminate themselves. I knew how to push buttons. Let me make a call, I said. At 7:15 a.m., I pulled into the Maple Grove HOA office parking lot. Cheryl's Mercedes was already there. I was wearing a button-down shirt with a digital recorder in the pocket, the same setup Grandma had worn last night. My phone was recording audio as backup. Virginia's one-party consent law meant that as long as I knew I was being recorded, this was legal. But what I was about to do was going to burn every bridge with the Kensingtons. No going back after this. I walked into the office. Cheryl was behind her desk, on the phone. When she saw me, her expression went from surprise to anger. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, then hung up. "What are you doing here?" "I want to make a deal." That got her attention. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "What kind of deal?" "You dropped the foreclosure on my grandmother's property. In exchange, I convince her and the other families to back off. No lawsuits, no complaints to the state, no more public meetings. Everyone walks away." Cheryl's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired," I said, injecting just enough defeat into my voice. "I've been undercover for 3 years. I'm supposed to be on leave, recovering. Instead, I'm fighting an HOA over lawn height violations. It's not worth it. My grandmother can pay something, not $47,000, but something reasonable. We settle, everyone moves on." I could see her calculating. This was what she wanted, the problem to go away quietly. "How much can she pay?" Cheryl asked. $5,000. That's what she has in savings. That's not even close to what she owes. It's what she has. Take it or leave it. But if you take it, the fight ends. No lawyers, no investigations, no FBI looking into your enforcement practices. There it was. The implicit threat wrapped in an offer. The suggestion that I had the power to make problems for her, but I was choosing not to use it. Cheryl was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. That same sharp, cold smile from before. "You're not actually FBI, are you?" she said. "You're bluffing. If you had any real evidence of wrongdoing, you wouldn't be here trying to make a deal. You'd have already filed charges." "I'm not bluffing." "Yes, you are." She stood up, walked around the desk. "Here's what I think, Mr. Webb. I think you're a federal employee who's in over his head. I think you came here expecting to intimidate me with your badge and your credentials, and you're realizing that I'm not some street criminal you can scare. I know the law. Everything we've done is legal, and your grandmother is going to lose her house today unless she pays in full. You're running a real estate scam. I'm enforcing HOA covenants. There's a difference. You're targeting vulnerable homeowners, forcing them into foreclosure, and buying their properties through your husband's LLC at below market rates. That's fraud." Cheryl laughed, actually laughed. "Prove it. Show me one law we've broken." "One. You can't, because we haven't. The violations are real. The fines are authorized by the CC and RS. The foreclosure process follows state law to the letter. And if Harold's company happens to buy properties that come on the market at distressed prices, that's just smart business. It's a pattern. It's opportunity. These people can't afford to maintain their homes to community standards. We're actually doing them a favor by helping them transition to more appropriate living situations. Your grandmother is 82 years old. She shouldn't be trying to maintain a 3-bedroom house with a yard. She should be in assisted living where people can take care of her." My hands clenched into fists. It took everything I had to keep my voice level. "So you admit it. You're forcing elderly people out of their homes. I'm enforcing community standards. If people can't meet those standards, they shouldn't live here. It's that simple. And the fact that your husband profits from their displacement is just a coincidence." Cheryl's smile widened. "Harold is a real estate investor. He buys distressed properties, improves them, and resells them. That's not illegal. That's capitalism. It's extortion. It's business. And you know what the beautiful part is, Mr. Webb? There's nothing you can do about it. Because we've been very, very careful to stay within the law. Every violation notice, every fine, every foreclosure, all documented, all legal, all defensible. You can complain to the state HOA board, but they'll find that we followed procedure. You can sue us, but you'll lose, and you'll waste years and thousands of dollars in legal fees. Or," she paused, letting the word hang, "or your grandmother can pay what she owes. Today, by 5 p.m., and this all goes away. She doesn't have $47,000. Then she'll lose her house. And honestly, Mr. Webb, that's probably for the best. She's old. She's alone. She can't keep up with the property. Better to sell now, take what equity she has left, and move somewhere she can be taken care of. We're not the villains here. We're just the ones willing to enforce the rules that everyone else is too polite to mention." I stared at her. This woman had just admitted, on tape, that she was deliberately targeting elderly homeowners, that the enforcement was about displacement, that her husband's company was profiting from the scheme. It wasn't quite a confession to fraud, but it was close. And combined with everything else we had, it might be enough. You're right, I said quietly. I can't stop you today. Cheryl's smile was triumphant. Then we're done here. I walked out of the office, got in my car, and immediately called Rebecca. I got it, I said. She admitted the whole thing. By 8:45 a.m., Rebecca had filed the emergency injunction in county court, with the recording attached as evidence. By 9:30, she'd requested an emergency hearing. By 10:15, we were in front of Judge Marion Castellano, a no-nonsense jurist in her 60s who'd been on the bench for 20 years. The Kensington's attorney, Richard Vance, was already there, arguing that the injunction request was improper, that Rebecca was under ethics investigation, that the HOA had followed all proper procedures. Judge Castellano listened to both sides, then asked to hear the recording. We played it in open court. When Cheryl's voice came through the speakers, she's old. She's alone. She can't keep up with the property. Better to sell now. I saw the judge's expression harden. When it got to the part about Harold buying distressed properties and the line, that's not illegal. That's capitalism. Vance actually winced. The recording ended. The courtroom was silent. Ms. Sue, Judge Castellano said, you're requesting an injunction to halt foreclosure proceedings on the Webb property, correct? Yes, Your Honor. And we're requesting that the court appoint an independent examiner to audit the HOA's enforcement practices over the past 2 years. Mr. Vance, your response? Vance stood. Your Honor, this recording was obtained without Ms. Kensington's knowledge. Virginia is a one-party consent state, Rebecca interjected. Mr. Webb was a participant in the conversation. The recording is legal. Even so, the statements don't constitute evidence of fraud. Ms. Kensington was simply explaining the HOA's enforcement philosophy. She admitted to targeting elderly homeowners for displacement so that her husband's company could profit from distressed sales, Rebecca said. That's not enforcement. That's a scheme to defraud. Judge Castellano held up a hand. I've heard enough. Here's my ruling. I'm granting a temporary injunction halting foreclosure proceedings on the Webb property pending a full hearing. I'm also ordering the HOA to produce all inspection records, board meeting minutes, and financial records for the past 2 years. And I'm appointing a special master to conduct an independent audit of the HOA's enforcement practices. Vance started to object, but the judge cut him off. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Virginia Attorney General's office for investigation of possible consumer protection violations. This court takes elder abuse very seriously, Mr. Vance, and what I heard on that recording raises significant concerns. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The injunction is effective immediately. We won. Grandma's house was safe, at least for now. The foreclosure was blocked. The investigation was underway. But as we left the courthouse, I had that old familiar feeling, the sense that we'd just poked a hornet's nest. I was right. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. Special Agent Webb. A man's voice, official tone. Yes. This is Sergeant Dale Kramer, Virginia State Police. I need you to come down to the station to answer some questions regarding a complaint we received. My stomach dropped. What kind of complaint? Unauthorized recording, witness intimidation, and impersonating a federal officer in the course of an HOA dispute. Can you come involuntarily? Or do I need to send a unit to pick you up? Drop a comment. Would you have worn the wire? Or is there a line you wouldn't cross even to save your grandmother's home? Let me know where you stand. I sat in an interview room at the Virginia State Police Barracks for 2 hours before Sergeant Kramer finally walked in. He was mid-50s, gray hair, the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much bureaucratic nonsense. He dropped a file folder on the table between us. Special Agent Marcus Webb, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Currently on mandatory administrative leave following a 3-year undercover operation. He looked up. That about right? Yes. And you're currently involved in a dispute between your grandmother and the Maple Grove HOA. I'm helping my grandmother fight an unjust foreclosure. That's not a crime. No, but recording someone without their consent might be, depending on the circumstances. And representing yourself as acting in an official FBI capacity when you're actually on leave, that's a problem. I never said I was acting in an official capacity. I told Cheryl Kensington I was an FBI agent, which I am. That's not impersonation. And Virginia is a one-party consent state. I was part of the conversation I recorded. That's legal. Kramer leaned back in his chair. You know what I think, Agent Webb? I think you're technically right on both counts. I think a lawyer would have a hard time making either of those charges stick. Then why am I here? Because someone with connections wants you jammed up. And because I need to make sure you understand something. He leaned forward. Whatever's going on with that HOA, however dirty it might be, you don't have a badge right now. You're on leave. That means you're a civilian. And civilians don't run undercover stings on HOA boards, no matter how justified they feel. I'm protecting my grandmother. I get it. I do. But there's a process. Lawyers, courts, investigations. You don't get to skip that process because you have FBI credentials. I met his eyes. The process takes months. My grandmother had days. Kramer was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. Look, off the record, I think the Maple Grove HOA is dirty as hell. We've had complaints about them before. Nothing we could act on, but enough to make me suspicious. And I listened to that recording. Cheryl Kensington basically admitted to running an elder abuse scheme. So why are you hassling me instead of investigating them? Because the complaint didn't come to me. It went to my captain, who got a call from someone at the county administration office, who got a call from someone connected to the Kensingtons. And now I have to follow up, or it looks like we're giving you preferential treatment because you're federal. So this is political. Everything's political when lawyers and money get involved. He stood up. I'm not charging you with anything, but I'm documenting this conversation, and I'm telling you officially, back off. Let the courts handle it. Let the AG's investigation run its course. Don't do anything else that could be construed as intimidation or harassment. And if the Kensingtons do something else, if they retaliate against my grandmother or the other families, then you call me. You don't handle it yourself. He slid a business card across the table. I mean it, Agent Webb. You're too close to this. You're not thinking like a federal agent right now. You're thinking like a grandson. And that's going to get you in trouble. He left. I sat there for another 10 minutes before they released me. When I got back to Grandma's house, it was almost 6 p.m. She was in the kitchen with Rebecca, Tom Pacheco, and 3 other neighbors I'd met during my door knocking. Marcus, thank God, Grandma said. We heard you were arrested. Not arrested. Questioned. The Kensingtons filed a complaint to jam me up. It's fine. It's not fine, Rebecca said. This is witness intimidation. They're trying to scare you off. It's working, I admitted. State police told me to back off. Let the investigation run its course. Which could take months, Tom said. Meanwhile, the rest of us are still getting violation notices. I got 3 more today, all dated yesterday, before the judge even issued the injunction. I looked at Rebecca. Can they do that? The injunction only applies to your grandmother's property. Everyone else is still vulnerable until the special master completes the audit and issues a report. How long will that take? Weeks, minimum. Maybe months. One of the other neighbors, an elderly man named Frank Delgado, spoke up. They came to my house this afternoon. Cheryl and 2 men I didn't recognize. Said they were conducting an emergency inspection of my property. I told them to leave, and they said if I didn't cooperate, they'd fine me for obstruction. Did you let them in? No, but they took pictures from the street. And this evening I found a violation notice on my door. $5,000 for hostile and uncooperative behavior toward HOA officials. That's insane, I said. They can't fine you for refusing entry. They just did, Frank said quietly. And I can't afford to fight them. I'm on a fixed income. $5,000 might as well be $5 million. I looked around the room. These were good people, retirees, families, working-class folks who'd saved their whole lives to own a home. And the Kensingtons were systematically destroying them. We need to go on offense, I said. Rebecca shook her head. Marcus, you just got warned off by state police. I know, but we can't just wait for the system to work. The Kensingtons are escalating. They're going after everyone who stood up at that meeting. We need to hit back harder. How? Tom asked. I thought about the files I'd compiled, the pattern of foreclosures, the LLC purchases, the profit margins. We need to prove the connection between the HOA enforcement and Harold Kensington's company. Show that it's not just correlation, it's coordination. That means financial records, bank statements, communications between Cheryl and Harold about specific properties. The special master will get those eventually, Rebecca said. Eventually isn't good enough. We need them now, before more families lose their homes. And how do you propose we get them? Rebecca asked. Those records are protected. You'd need a subpoena. Or someone on the inside, I said. Everyone looked at me. What are you thinking? Rebecca asked slowly. I remembered the board meeting. The way Patricia Monroe had looked when the accusations came out. The shock on her face. The anger. I'm thinking not everyone on that board is dirty, I said. Patricia Monroe looked genuinely surprised when we laid out the scheme. So did Gerald Voss. Maybe they didn't know what Cheryl was doing. Maybe they thought the enforcement was legitimate. So maybe one of them would be willing to help us, if they knew the truth. I found Patricia Monroe's address in the HOA directory. She lived 4 blocks from Grandma, in a modest 2-story with a garden full of roses. I knocked on her door at 8 p.m. She opened it, saw me, and immediately tried to close it. Please, I said. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I don't want to get involved. You're already involved. You're on the board. And unless you resign, you're going to be named in every lawsuit that comes out of this mess. That stopped her. She looked at me for a long moment, then stepped back and let me in. We sat in her living room. She didn't offer coffee or tea, just sat across from me with her arms crossed, defensive. How long have you been on the board? I asked. 12 years. And how long has Cheryl been president? 3 years. Did the enforcement change after she took over? Patricia was quiet. Then, yes. How? It got stricter, more aggressive. Before Cheryl, we'd send a notice if someone's lawn was really overgrown or if they painted their house a non-approved color. But we'd work with people, give them time to fix it, waive fees if they were having financial trouble. And after Cheryl, everything became a violation. Lawn height down to the 10th of an inch. Mailbox paint fade. Garden decorations. And the fines, they got so high. I questioned it a few times in board meetings, but Cheryl said we needed to maintain property values, that if we didn't enforce standards strictly, the whole community would decline. Did you know about her husband's company buying foreclosed properties? Patricia's face crumpled. Not until you said it at the meeting. I swear, I had no idea. When those families sold their homes, Cheryl said they'd decided to move on their own. She never mentioned that Harold was buying the properties. Did you vote to authorize the foreclosures? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. All of them. Cheryl presented them as routine enforcement. She said the homeowners had been given multiple chances to comply and had refused. I trusted her. She lied to you. I know that now. I leaned forward. Patricia, I need your help. The special master is going to audit the HOA's records, but that could take months. In the meantime, more families are going to get hit with violations. More people are going to lose their homes. Unless we can prove what Cheryl is doing right now. What do you want from me? Access to the HOA's financial records, bank statements, communications between board members, anything that shows coordination between the enforcement actions and Harold's property purchases. She shook her head. I can't. That's confidential board business. It's evidence of fraud. And you have a legal obligation to preserve it, especially now that there's an investigation underway. If Cheryl finds out I gave you anything, she'll destroy me. She'll sue me personally, claim I've violated my fiduciary duty. She's going to destroy you anyway, I said bluntly. When this all comes out, and it will come out, every board member who voted for those foreclosures is going to be named in lawsuits. Your best chance of avoiding personal liability is to cooperate with the investigation. Show that you acted in good faith, that you were deceived by Cheryl, and that as soon as you learned the truth, you did the right thing. Patricia's hands were shaking. I don't know. How many families have lost their homes because you trusted Cheryl? I asked quietly. 7 at least. Maybe more. How many more are you willing to let her destroy before you act? She closed her eyes. When she opened them, They were wet. "What do you need?" she asked. Patricia gave me access to the HOA's online management system that night. Username and password. Full board-level access. "I'm documenting this," she said. "I'm writing a letter to the special master explaining that I provided access because I believe there was evidence of fraud that needed to be preserved. If this goes wrong, I'm not going down alone." Fair enough. I spent the next 4 hours downloading everything. Bank statements for the HOA account going back 3 years. Meeting minutes. Email correspondence between board members. Contracts with vendors. And, jackpot, a folder labeled Property Acquisitions that contained spreadsheets tracking specific homes, their violation histories, foreclosure timelines, and purchase prices. It was all there. The entire scheme, documented in Excel. Cheryl had been meticulous. Every property targeted for foreclosure was tracked from first violation notice through final sale. The spreadsheets showed projected profit margins, holding costs, resale timelines. There were even notes. Elderly owner, no family support, low resistance expected, and financial hardship due to medical bills. Accelerate timeline. It was the most coldly calculated elder abuse scheme I'd seen in my career. I sent everything to Rebecca with a note. "This is the smoking gun. File it with the court tomorrow morning." Then I sent a copy to Jennifer Ortiz with a note. "Federal case. Wire fraud, mail fraud, possible RICO. We need to move." I was about to shut down my laptop when I noticed one more folder. Correspondence. Private. I opened it. Inside were email chains between Cheryl Kensington and someone named D. Rains. The emails went back 2 years. And they weren't about HOA business. They were about a development project. Cheryl, Phase 1 acquisitions on track. 7 properties secured, 3 more in foreclosure pipeline. Once we hit critical mass, 15 to 20 parcels, we can approach the county about rezoning. Projected ROI on full development, $12 to $15 million. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't just about flipping houses. The Kensingtons were trying to assemble enough properties to force a rezoning and redevelop the entire neighborhood. I clicked through more emails. D. Rains was a developer. He and Harold Kensington had a partnership agreement. The plan was to acquire 20 to 25 homes through foreclosure, then petition the county to rezone the area from residential to mixed use. Once rezoned, they demolished the homes and build a commercial complex, retail and office space. The emails included architectural renderings, financial projections, even a timeline. Target County hearing, Q2 2025. This wasn't a scam. It was a land grab. And every family in Maple Grove was in the way. Comment below, at what point does this cross from HOA abuse into something bigger? And what would you do if you found out your entire neighborhood was being systematically dismantled for profit? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at Grandma's kitchen table, reading through every email, every document, building the case in my head the way I'd done 100 times before on financial fraud investigations. By 4 a.m., I had it mapped out. The scheme. First, Cheryl Kensington uses her position as HOA president to target specific homeowners with fabricated or exaggerated violations. Second, fines escalate until homeowners can't pay. Third, HOA forecloses on the properties. Fourth, Harold Kensington's LLC buys the properties at below market prices. Fifth, once enough properties are acquired, the Kensingtons and their partner, D. Rains, petition for rezoning. 6. Neighborhood gets demolished and redeveloped into a commercial complex. 7th. Projected profit, $12 to $15 million. Federal charges. Wire fraud, email communications to facilitate the scheme. Mail fraud, violation notices sent via USPS. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Possible RICO, ongoing criminal enterprise. Elder abuse, targeting vulnerable homeowners. Honest services fraud, if any county officials were involved in the rezoning plan. At 6 a.m., I called Jennifer Ortiz. "This better be good," she answered, voice thick with sleep. "It's better than good. It's a federal case. Full RICO predicate. I'm sending you the files now." I heard rustling, then the sound of her laptop booting up. "Marcus, what did you do?" I got access to the HOA's internal records. Everything. Financial statements, emails, development plans. The Kensingtons aren't just flipping houses. They're trying to force a rezoning so they can demolish the entire neighborhood and build a commercial complex. Silence. Then, how did you get access? A board member gave it to me. She didn't know about the scheme and wanted to cooperate with the investigation. Did you coerce her? No. I explained her legal exposure and gave her the opportunity to do the right thing. She chose to cooperate. More silence. Marcus, you're on administrative leave. You're not authorized to conduct investigations. I'm not conducting an investigation. I'm gathering evidence to protect my grandmother and 17 other families from an ongoing criminal enterprise. Everything I've done is legal. And now I'm turning that evidence over to the Bureau so you can do your job. I heard her exhale slowly. Send me everything. I'll review it and take it to the ASAC. If it's as solid as you say, we'll open a case. How long? For a case this size? With this many moving parts? We'll need to brief the U.S. Attorney, get authorization for subpoenas, coordinate with state police and the AG's office. A week, maybe 2, before we can move. That's too long. The Kensingtons know we're onto them. They're going to start destroying evidence. Then we'll add obstruction charges. Marcus, you need to let us handle this now. You've done your part. Step back. I will. After we stop them. I hung up before she could argue. Rebecca filed the new evidence with the court that morning. By noon, the local news had picked up the story. HOA accused of elder abuse scheme and land grab plot. The TV crew showed up at Maple Grove by 2 p.m. They interviewed Grandma, Tom Pacheco, Frank Delgado, and half a dozen other families. The story spread fast, local news, then regional, then national. By evening, it was on cable news. CNN ran a segment. When HOAs go rogue, the dark side of community governance. The court of public opinion moved faster than the legal system ever could. Cheryl Kensington's phone number and email were leaked online. She started getting death threats. Someone spray-painted elder abuser on her driveway. Her Mercedes was keyed in a grocery store parking lot. I didn't condone any of it, but I understood the anger. Harold Kensington released a statement through his attorney. The allegations are false and defamatory. Maple Grove Properties Holdings is a legitimate real estate investment company. Any suggestion of coordination with HOA enforcement is a malicious fabrication. We will pursue all legal remedies against those spreading these lies. But the damage was done. The story was out. And once the public gets hold of something like this, there's no putting it back in the box. That evening, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. State law required it. Once a certain number of homeowners petition for a special session, the board has to convene. 73 homeowners signed the petition. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, but it was standing room only. People spilled out into the parking lot. News cameras were everywhere. Cheryl Kensington tried to maintain control, but the crowd wasn't having it. You need to resign, someone shouted. All of you. The whole board. You're criminals. Cheryl banged her gavel. This meeting will come to order, or we will adjourn. You can't adjourn. Tom Pacheco stood up. State law says you have to allow homeowners to speak at a special session. So sit down and listen. One by one, families stood up and told their stories. The Pachecos hit with $8,000 in fines for a porch light. The Hendersons threatened with foreclosure over a fence height. Yolanda Martinez facing $12,000 in violations because her son played basketball. Frank Delgado fined $5,000 for uncooperative behavior. And Grandma, 82 years old, standing in front of a room full of her neighbors, describing how the HOA had tried to steal her home. By the time she finished, half the room was in tears. I'm calling for a vote, Tom said. Immediate removal of the entire board and appointment of an interim governing committee pending new elections. You can't do that, Cheryl started. Yes, we can, Rebecca said, standing up. HOA bylaws allow for removal of board members by a 2/3 vote of homeowners present at a special meeting. And given that we have over 70 homeowners here, we have more than enough for quorum. This is a coup. This is democracy, Rebecca said. Now sit down. The vote was called. 71 homeowners voted to remove the board. 2 abstained. Cheryl Kensington was out. I was helping Grandma into my car after the meeting when I saw the Virginia State Police cruisers pull into the parking lot. 4 of them, lights flashing. Sergeant Kramer got out, along with 3 other officers. They walked straight to Cheryl Kensington, who was standing by her Mercedes, phone pressed to her ear. Cheryl Kensington, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Her face went white. What? No, you can't. You have the right to remain silent. They cuffed her right there in the parking lot, in front of 70 homeowners and a dozen news cameras. Harold Kensington was arrested an hour later at his office. D. Raines, the developer, was picked up the next morning. The FBI executed search warrants on the HOA office, Harold's business, and both Kensington's homes. They seized computers, phones, financial records, everything. Jennifer Ortiz called me that night. The U.S. attorney is taking the case. We're charging all 3 of them, Cheryl, Harold, and Raines, with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and elder abuse under federal law. If convicted, they're looking at 20 years. What about the properties? The families who already lost their homes? We're working on that. The court appointed a receiver to take over Maple Grove Properties holdings. They'll review all the property transactions. If we can prove the sales were fraudulent, we can potentially unwind them and return the homes to the original owners. How long will that take? Months. Maybe a year. But Marcus, you did it. You stopped them. I looked at Grandma, sitting in her kitchen, drinking tea, finally at peace. We stopped them, I said. All of us. But it wasn't over. 2 days after the arrests, I got a call from Patricia Monroe. Marcus, you need to see this. She sent me a file, more emails from the HOA's system, ones I'd missed in my initial download. They were between Cheryl Kensington and someone identified only as county admin. The emails discussed the rezoning plan, but they also discussed something else. Expedited approval in exchange for consulting fees. Bribes. County officials were in on it. I forwarded the emails to Jennifer immediately. She called back within an hour. We're expanding the investigation. FBI's Public Corruption Unit is taking lead. If county officials were taking bribes to facilitate the rezoning, this goes way beyond HOA fraud. How many officials? We don't know yet, but we're about to find out. Over the next week, the investigation exploded. FBI agents interviewed dozens of county employees. Subpoenas went out to the planning department, the zoning board, the county executive's office. 3 county officials were arrested. 2 more resigned. The local news couldn't keep up. Every day there was a new development, a new arrest, a new revelation. And at the center of it all was Maple Grove, a quiet suburban neighborhood that had become ground zero for one of the largest public corruption cases in Virginia history. The U.S. Attorney's Office asked me to testify before the grand jury. I spent 2 days walking them through the evidence, the timeline, the scheme. The grand jury returned indictments on all defendants, Cheryl and Harold Kensington, D. Raines, and 3 county officials. The charges were extensive. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 18 U.S.C. Section 1349. Wire fraud, 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Mail fraud, 18 U.S.C. Section 1341. Honest services fraud, 18 U.S.C. Section 1346. Bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds, 18 U.S.C. Section 666. Elder abuse, Virginia state law, prosecuted in parallel. If convicted on all counts, the Kensingtons were looking at 30-plus years in federal prison. Their attorneys tried to negotiate plea deals. The U.S. attorney refused. This case is going to trial, she told me. We're going to make an example out of them. Every HOA board in the country needs to see what happens when you abuse your power. The trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, the receiver began the process of unwinding the fraudulent property sales. 4 families had already gotten their homes back. 3 more were in negotiation. Grandma's violation notices were voided. The $47,300 in fines was erased. The HOA, now under new, honest leadership, formally apologized. But the damage lingered. Families had been traumatized. Trust in community governance was shattered. And even with the Kensingtons in custody, people were scared. What if it happens again? Yolanda Martinez asked at a community meeting. What if the next board does the same thing? Then we fight again, Tom Pacheco said. And we win again. Because now we know what to look for. One afternoon, I was going through old boxes in Grandma's attic. She was finally ready to do some cleaning when I found something interesting. A newsletter from 2019. The Maple Grove Community Newsletter, published by the HOA. On the back page was a photo from a community barbecue. And there, standing in the background, barely visible, were Cheryl Kensington and Dee Raines. Together, for years before the scheme allegedly started. They'd known each other all along. I took the newsletter to Jennifer. This proves premeditation. They were planning this for years. She smiled. That's going in the trial exhibit. Jury's going to love it. The small details. The things people forget about. That's what breaks cases. I thought about that tree house in Grandma's backyard. The one I'd built as a kid. The one that had probably violated some HOA rule that nobody cared about. Until Cheryl needed leverage. I went out and looked at it. Still standing after all these years. Weathered but solid. Just like Grandma. Just like this community. 6 months later, the trial began in U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. The prosecution called 43 witnesses over 3 weeks. Homeowners who'd been targeted. Board members who'd been deceived. FBI agents who'd analyzed the financial records. Forensic accountants who'd traced the money. And me. I spent 2 days on the stand, walking the jury through the investigation. How I discovered the scheme. How the pattern of violations targeted vulnerable homeowners. How the Kensingtons had used the HOA as a weapon to facilitate their land grab. The defense attorneys tried to rattle me. Suggested I'd exceeded my authority. Claimed I'd coerced Patricia Monroe into giving me access to the records. Argued that I was biased because my grandmother was involved. I stayed calm. Stuck to the facts. Let the evidence speak. On cross-examination, Cheryl Kensington's attorney asked, Agent Webb, isn't it true that you were on administrative leave during this investigation? That you had no official authority to investigate the HOA? I wasn't conducting an official investigation, I said. I was protecting my grandmother from an ongoing crime. Everything I did was legal. And when I discovered evidence of federal offenses, I immediately turned it over to the appropriate authorities. But you had a personal stake in the outcome. Yes, my grandmother's home. Just like 40 other families in that community had a personal stake. That doesn't make the evidence less valid. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Delgado, handled the redirect. Agent Webb, in your 3 years investigating financial fraud, how many cases have you worked? 47. And how many resulted in convictions? 45. 2 are still pending. In your professional opinion, does the Maple Grove scheme constitute wire fraud and conspiracy? Absolutely. It's one of the most clear-cut cases I've seen. The jury was paying attention. I could see it in their faces, the anger, the disgust. This wasn't a complicated financial fraud case with offshore accounts and shell companies. This was simple. Evil, but simple. People in power hurting vulnerable families for profit. The defense tried to argue that the HOA enforcement was legitimate, that the Kensingtons had simply been doing their jobs as board members, that the property purchases were independent business decisions unrelated to HOA actions. But the emails destroyed that narrative. The prosecution played them for the jury. Target the elderly ones first, less likely to fight back. Once we hit 15 properties, we can force the rezoning. County admin confirmed. $50K gets us expedited approval. You could see the jury's expressions harden with each email. Cheryl Kensington took the stand in her own defense. Big mistake. Rachel Delgado tore her apart on cross. Ms. Kensington, you testified that the HOA violations were legitimate. Is that correct? Yes. And you conducted the inspections yourself? Yes, along with other board members. Can you tell the jury when you inspected Dorothy Webb's property on June 15, 2023? The date of the violation notice claiming her lawn was 3.7 inches tall. I don't recall the specific date. You don't recall? Because Mrs. Webb's grandson has security camera footage showing that no one from the HOA was on her property that day. Would you like to see it? Cheryl's face went pale. I may have gotten the dates confused. Or you fabricated the violation. Isn't that true? No, Ms. Kensington, in your email to D. Raines dated March 3, 2024, you wrote, Web property ready for acquisition, violation sufficient to justify foreclosure. What did you mean by that? I was just updating him on HOA business. Mr. Raines isn't a member of the HOA. He's a real estate developer and your business partner. Why were you updating him on HOA enforcement actions? Silence. Ms. Kensington, answer the question. We were discussing potential investment opportunities. Investment opportunities. You mean properties you were forcing into foreclosure so your husband could buy them at below-market prices and flip them for profit? That's exactly what happened, isn't it? You used your position as HOA president to target vulnerable homeowners, fabricate violations, and force them out of their homes so you and your husband could profit. Isn't that true? Cheryl's attorney objected. The judge sustained it. But the damage was done. The jury had seen her squirm. Deliberations took 4 days. On the 5th day, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. Cheryl Kensington, 27 years in federal prison. Harold Kensington, 25 years. D. Raines, 18 years. The 3 county officials got between 8 and 12 years each. When the verdict was read, Cheryl collapsed in her chair. Harold just stared straight ahead, expressionless. Grandma squeezed my hand. It's over, she whispered. It's over, I agreed. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. The legal case was over. But the work of rebuilding the community, restoring trust, healing the trauma, that would take years. The court ordered full restitution. Every family that had been targeted got their fines refunded. The 7 families who'd lost their homes got them back. The receiver unwound the sales and returned the properties. Maple Grove Properties Holdings was dissolved. Its assets were liquidated to pay restitution and cover legal costs. The Kensingtons' personal assets were seized. Their house, their cars, their bank accounts. Everything. Harold's Mercedes, the one Cheryl had driven to Grandma's house that day, was auctioned off. Tom Pacheco bought it for $8,000 and donated it to a charity that provides vehicles to low-income families. Poetic justice. The case sparked a wave of HOA reform legislation across Virginia and other states. New laws required. Independent audits of HOA finances. Limits on fine amounts. Mandatory mediation before foreclosure. Criminal background checks for board members. Transparency requirements for property transactions involving board members or their families. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Rebecca Sue became a national advocate for HOA reform. She testified before state legislatures, wrote op-eds, gave interviews. Maple Grove was an extreme case, she said in one interview. But the underlying problem is systemic. HOAs have too much power and too little oversight. We need to fix that before more families get hurt. Maple Grove held new HOA elections. Tom Pacheco was elected president. Patricia Monroe stayed on the board. Her cooperation with the investigation had earned her a second chance. The new board immediately passed reforms. All violation notices must include photographic evidence. Fines capped at $500 per violation. Mandatory appeals process. Board meetings live-streamed and recorded. Annual independent financial audits. They also established a community fund to help families facing financial hardship with home maintenance. And they renamed the community park. It was now called Dorothy Webb Park. Grandma cried when they unveiled the sign. A year after the trial, I was back at Grandma's house for Thanksgiving. The whole family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The house was full of noise and laughter. I stood in the backyard, looking at that old tree house. I'd finally gotten around to fixing it. New boards, new rope ladder, fresh paint. Grandma came out, handed me a cup of coffee. You thinking about taking it down? She asked. No. I'm thinking about how glad I am it's still here. She smiled. Me too. We stood there for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. A neighborhood that was finally at peace. Marcus, Grandma said quietly, Thank you. For fighting for me. For all of us. You fought too, Grandma. You stood up when it mattered. I had help. We all did. That's how it works. None of us could have done it alone. She squeezed my hand. Your grandfather would be proud of you. I felt my throat tighten. I hope so. Inside, someone called that dinner was ready. We headed back in, leaving the treehouse standing in the fading light. A reminder that some things are worth fighting for, and that when good people stand together, they can beat even the most corrupt systems. 6 months later, I got a call from Jennifer Ortiz. Marcus, I thought you'd want to know. The FBI just arrested 4 more people in connection with the Maple Grove case. Who? Officials in 2 other counties. Turns out Raines was running the same scheme in multiple jurisdictions. Maple Grove was just the first one we uncovered. I felt that old familiar weight settle in. How many families? We're still counting, but at least 50 properties across 3 counties. Jesus. Yeah, but we wouldn't have found any of it if you hadn't stopped them in Maple Grove. You broke the case open. Everything else followed from that. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about all those families. 50 more stories like Grandma's. 50 more homes saved because one person decided to fight back. It wasn't about being FBI. It wasn't about having special skills or connections. It was about refusing to accept injustice. About standing up even when the system seemed stacked against you. About believing that ordinary people, working together, can beat corruption. I thought about writing this all down. Maybe someone else would read it and realize they didn't have to accept being victimized by their HOA or their local government or any other system that claimed authority over their lives. Maybe someone else would fight back. And maybe we could build a world where people like the Kensingtons don't get away with it. Where communities protect their vulnerable members instead of preying on them. Where home means safety, not fear. I looked at the photo on my desk, Grandma standing in front of Dorothy Webb Park, smiling, surrounded by neighbors who'd become friends through shared struggle. That's what we'd built. Not just a legal victory, but a community. And that was worth more than any conviction. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to Grandma's story. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to fight an HOA or a corrupt local system? What happened? And if you're facing something similar right now, know that you're not alone. There are lawyers, advocates, and organizations that can help. Don't give up. And remember, sometimes the best weapon against corruption isn't a badge or a law degree. It's just refusing to be silent. Thanks for watching. Take care of each other out there.